The moon base, called Hope Station, sat quietly on the gray dust of the Sea of Tranquility. It had been built 40 years after the first humans landed on the moon, but unlike those first small steps, Hope Station was a real home. 3,000 people lived there. Scientists studied moon rock. Engineers built ships in low gravity. Children even went to school in a dome made of thick glass, looking up at the stars every night before they slept. Captain Elena Vasquez walked through the main corridor of the base, checking on the night crew. She had served at Hope Station for 6 years. She knew every hallway, every room, every sound the base made when it settled at night. She liked the quiet hours best. The lights were dimmed, and only a few workers moved through the halls, doing checks on the air systems and the solar panels outside. "Anything strange tonight?" she asked the young officer at the control desk. "No, ma'am," said the officer, a man named Kian Okafor. "Same as always. Quiet." Elena nodded and looked at the big screen showing space around the moon. Small dots moved across it, showing satellites and supply ships. Everything looked normal. She had no idea that in less than 1 hour, everything she knew would end. Far above the moon, hidden by the black of space, something huge began to move. It was not a human ship. It was not even shaped like anything humans had built. It looked more like a long blade, dark gray and sharp, with strange lights blinking along its sides like eyes opening from sleep. This ship was 3 kilometers long. It had crossed many stars to reach this small, blue and white planet called Earth. The beings inside it were called the Xoreth, and they did not come in peace. The Xoreth had been watching Earth for over a year. Their scouts had studied human radio signals, human television shows, and human weapons. They had come to one clear decision: humans were weak, disorganized, and easy to conquer. Earth had many resources the Xoreth needed: water, metals, and a strong sun nearby for their ships to refuel. The moon base was simply in the way. It would be destroyed first, as a message that said clearly, resistance is useless. Back on the moon, Kian's screen flickered. He frowned and tapped it. "Captain, I'm getting something odd. A large object, real large, just appeared on radar. It wasn't there a second ago." Elena walked over quickly. "Define large." 3 kilometers, ma'am. That can't be right. Let me recheck." But it was right. The ship had not appeared out of nowhere. It had simply been using technology humans didn't understand. Technology that bent light around itself, hiding its shape until it was ready to be seen. Now it revealed itself on purpose. It wanted to be seen. Alarms began to ring through Hope Station. Red lights flashed in every hallway. Elena grabbed the comm system. "All personnel, this is Captain Vasquez. We have an unidentified object approaching the base. This is not a drill. Move to shelter positions immediately." People began to run. Parents grabbed their children from beds. Scientists locked away important data. Nobody knew what was happening, but everyone could feel that something terrible was coming. In orbit, the alien battleship opened its main weapon. It did not look like a human weapon. There was no visible cannon or missile. Instead, the front of the ship glowed a deep purple, then white, gathering energy from a small captured star inside its core. This was the Xoreth's favorite weapon, a compressed beam of pure heat and force, able to melt through rock and metal in seconds. Elena stood in the command center, watching the screen. She saw the ship's front light up. She understood, in that terrible second, exactly what was about to happen. "Everyone get down!" she screamed. The beam struck Hope Station's outer dome first. The thick glass, built to survive meteor strikes and solar storms, shattered instantly, as if it were made of thin ice. The air inside rushed out into space with a roar that shook the whole structure. Then the beam moved along the surface, cutting through buildings, through the school dome, through the solar farms that gave the base its power. Kian was thrown from his chair as the floor shook beneath him. Sparks flew from broken machines. Somewhere in the base, people screamed, and then the screaming stopped as the air disappeared from that section. Elena grabbed onto a support beam, watching in horror as the main screen showed half the base simply gone, turned into fire and dust and broken metal, floating away into the black sky. "Seal Section 4. "Seal it now," she yelled, though she wasn't sure anyone could still hear her. The remaining crew fought to close the emergency doors, trying to save what was left of the base. Elena ran, pulling injured people toward the shelter rooms, ignoring the blood on her hands, ignoring the fact that her own home was dying around her. She had trained for emergencies her whole career, but nothing had prepared her for an enemy from another world. Above, the Xoreth captain, a tall being named Threxil Vaughn, watched the destruction calmly from his ship. Threxil had gray skin and eyes that glowed faint yellow, like a cat's eyes in darkness. He had destroyed many worlds before this one, always following the same plan: show overwhelming force first, then offer surrender. It always worked. Every species they had met before had surrendered quickly, once they saw what the Xoreth weapons could do. "Status report," Threxil said to his second officer, a smaller alien named Scree. "The base structure is 70% destroyed, Captain," Scree answered. "Life signs are dropping rapidly. Should we finish the job?" Threxil considered this. Total destruction was sometimes necessary, but it was wasteful. A living population, once frightened enough, made better slaves than a dead one. "No, hold fire, let them suffer, let them see what we can do. We will send the surrender message now." The beam stopped. Silence fell across what remained of Hope Station. Emergency lights flickered in the darkness. Elena, covered in dust, checked her communicator. It buzzed with a strange signal, not from Earth, not from any human source. A voice, cold and slow, spoke through it, in broken but understandable English. "Humans, you have witnessed our power. Surrender your world, or be destroyed, as this base was destroyed. You have 1 hour to respond." Elena stared at the device in her shaking hand. Around her, survivors gathered in the one remaining shelter room, injured, frightened, but alive. She looked at their faces: engineers, scientists, soldiers, even a few children who had made it out in time. She thought about what to say to them, what to say to Earth, what to say to whatever was floating above them right now, waiting for an answer. Back on Earth, in a command bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Marcus Webb received the emergency signal from the moon at almost the same moment world leaders did. Screens across the planet lit up with the same terrifying image: half of Hope Station gone, survivors trapped, and a message of surrender demanded within the hour. Marcus was 60 years old, a career soldier who had seen war on Earth many times, but never anything like this. He watched the footage sent back by the base's last working cameras before more channels went dark completely. He watched the beam cut through steel like paper. He watched people running, screaming, some not making it in time. "Get me the president," Marcus said quietly. "And get me every scientist who has ever written about theoretical alien contact. We need answers, and we need them now." Within minutes, an emergency meeting formed between the leaders of the world's largest nations. It was the first time in history all of them had spoken together in the same call, united not by treaty or trade, but by fear. On the screen, footage from Hope Station played over and over, a reminder of how quickly all human plans could turn to dust. "They want an answer in less than an hour," said the President of the United States, her voice tight with stress. "What answer do we give?" "We can't fight that," said the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. "Did you see that weapon? We have nothing that can stop that." "We have to consider surrender terms," said another leader, though his voice shook as he said it. "If it saves lives." "No." Marcus's voice cut through the noise. Every leader turned to look at him through their screens. "With respect, sir, madam, everyone, if we surrender now, we surrender forever. We don't know what these things want. Slaves, resources, total destruction later, once they don't need us anymore. Surrender guarantees nothing, except that we lose all choice in what happens next." "Then what do you suggest, General?" the President asked. "We fight a ship that can destroy a moon base in seconds?" "I suggest we buy time," Marcus said. "We answer them. We stall, and while we stall, we prepare. We have research programs on Earth that most people don't even know about. Weapons built for worst-case scenarios. Technology built from theories nobody thought we'd ever need. It's time to use them." There was silence on the call. Marcus was talking about Project Hammerfall, a secret defense program started decades earlier, funded quietly by multiple nations working together after early telescopes had picked up strange signals from deep space, signals that suggested humanity was not alone and might not be safe. Most of the world's governments had forgotten about it, buried under budget cuts and doubt, But a small number of scientists and engineers had kept working, quietly, patiently, building weapons and ships meant for a day nobody believed would actually come. That day had come. "Do it," the president said finally. "Answer their message. Buy us time. And Marcus, get Project Hammerfall online. All of it." Back on the moon, Elena had gathered the surviving crew into the one intact shelter. She had counted the survivors twice, hoping the number would be higher the second time. It wasn't. Of 3,000 people, only 412 remained alive, huddled together in the dark, breathing recycled air that grew thinner every hour. She looked at the communicator again. The message from the alien ship blinked, waiting. She knew she wasn't the one who would decide Earth's answer. That decision belonged to leaders far below her. On the blue planet she could see through a crack in the shelter's wall. But she was the one who had to survive long enough to see what they decided. "What do we do, Captain?" Kian asked, his voice hoarse from smoke and dust. Elena looked at him, then at the frightened faces around her. Men and women she had worked beside for years. Children who had never imagined they would see war of any kind, let alone war with beings from another star. "We survive," she said firmly. "We wait, and we trust that Earth won't just roll over and die." Above them, unseen, the alien battleship waited too, its captain confident that this small, primitive planet would soon belong to the Xoreth Empire, just like 100 worlds before it. Threxel Vaughn did not know about Project Hammerfall. He did not know that beneath the surface of Earth, hidden factories had begun to wake up, their machines starting for the first time in years. He did not know that in secret bases across 6 continents, ships built from strange new physics, weapons never tested outside of computer simulations, and soldiers trained for exactly this nightmare scenario, were all being called into action at once. The Xoreth had conquered 100 worlds by showing overwhelming force and demanding quick surrender. Every species before humans had given in, afraid, hopeless, unwilling to fight a battle they believed they could not win. But humans were different. Humans had a long, strange history of refusing to give up, even when the odds were impossible. They had survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and their own mistakes. They had built weapons meant only for nightmares that never came. And now, for the first time, that nightmare had arrived. An hour passed slowly on the moon, each minute stretching painfully long for the survivors trapped in the dark. Then the communicator buzzed again, carrying a message not from the aliens, but from Earth itself. A short, coded message, meant only for Elena and her people. "Hold on, Hope Station. Help is coming. Do not lose faith." Elena read the message twice, then looked up at the ceiling, imagining the blue planet somewhere far above the broken dome. For the first time since the attack began, she allowed herself a small, tired smile. Whatever Earth was planning, it was coming. And somewhere above the moon, an alien captain, who had never lost a battle, was about to learn that some planets did not know how to surrender. The first response Earth sent to the Xoreth was carefully written by a team of the best diplomats and scientists on the planet, working together, under Marcus Webb's watchful eye. It was designed to sound confused, slow, and unsure, exactly the kind of answer a frightened, primitive species might give. It asked for more time to discuss the terms and understand what surrender would mean for the people of Earth. It was, in truth, a lie meant to buy hours, maybe a full day, while the real answer prepared itself in secret. Threxel received the message with mild amusement. Humans, like every other species before them, were afraid and confused. He granted them one additional day, confident that fear would do the rest of the work for him. He ordered his ship to remain in orbit around the moon, watching, waiting, while below on Earth, secret gates opened in mountains and deserts, revealing ships that no human outside a small circle of scientists and soldiers had ever seen before. Elena Vasquez, watching Earth grow brighter as it rose over the horizon of the broken moon base, did not know exactly what was coming, but she knew, deep in her chest, that the fight for humanity's future had only just begun. In the shelter, the survivors tried to rest, though none of them could truly sleep. Kian sat near the door, checking the air filters again and again, as if watching them closely could somehow make the oxygen last longer. A young engineer named Priya Nair worked quietly in a corner, trying to repair a broken radio so they could hear more of what was happening on Earth. She had lost her sister in the first strike, but she did not cry. She simply kept working, her hands shaking slightly, her eyes fixed on the wires in front of her. "You should rest," Elena told her gently. "I can't," Priya said. "If I stop moving, I'll start thinking. And if I start thinking, I don't know if I'll be able to stop." Elena understood. She had seen this before, in soldiers who had lost friends in battle. The mind protected itself by staying busy, by focusing on small tasks, instead of the enormous horror waiting just outside the door. She let Priya keep working, and moved on to check on the others. A group of children sat together near the back wall, wrapped in emergency blankets. One of them, a boy no older than 8, looked up at Elena with wide, frightened eyes. "Are the monsters going to come back?" he asked. Elena knelt down beside him. She did not know the answer. She did not know if the aliens would return to finish what they started, or if Earth's plan, whatever it was, would work in time. But she knew what the boy needed to hear. "Earth is coming to help us," she said, keeping her voice steady and calm. "We just need to be brave a little longer." The boy nodded, though he did not look fully convinced. None of them did. But the words gave them something to hold on to in the darkness, and sometimes that was enough. Meanwhile, deep beneath the Nevada desert, in a facility so secret that most senators did not even know it existed, engineers and scientists worked through the night, preparing machines that had been designed decades earlier and tested only in simulations. The facility was called Site Prometheus, and it was the heart of Project Hammerfall. Dr. Amara Osei, the lead scientist of the project, stood in front of a massive hangar where 3 prototype warships sat under bright lights. They were unlike anything else humans had built: sleek, dark, built using materials discovered through years of studying strange radiation patterns detected from deep space. The ships had never flown in real combat. Now, they would have no choice. "Systems check complete," said one of her assistants. "The Valkyrie-class ships are ready for pilot assignment." Amara looked at the ships with a mixture of pride and fear. She had spent 15 years of her life on this project, often doubting whether any of it would ever be needed. Now that the moment had come, she wished more than anything that she had been wrong. "Get me General Webb," she said. "Tell him Hammerfall is ready to begin Phase 1. Marcus Webb arrived at Site Prometheus within hours, flown in on a fast military jet. He walked through the hangar, looking at the 3 warships with the same mixture of awe and worry that Amara felt. "Only 3 ships," he said. "Will it be enough?" "3 ships, but not ordinary ships," Amara said. "These aren't just faster or stronger than what the aliens have seen from us. They use a completely different kind of engine, one based on theories we only understood after finding pieces of debris from a probe that crashed in Siberia 12 years ago. That probe wasn't ours, General. It was theirs. Or from something like them." Marcus turned to look at her sharply. "You're telling me we've had alien technology for over a decade?" "Not technology exactly," Amara said. "Just enough clues to understand certain principles they use. Weapons, engines, shields. We reverse-engineered what we could and built our own versions, using different materials, different methods. It's not a copy. It's something new, built with knowledge no one else on Earth was allowed to know about, for exactly this kind of moment." Marcus looked at the ships again, this time with a new kind of respect. "How soon can pilots be trained?" "They already have been," Amara said, "for years. A small group, kept secret, training in simulators, built to mimic combat we hoped would never happen. They know the ships. They know the risks. They are ready, General. As ready as anyone can be for something like this." At that moment, in a nearby building, 3 pilots sat quietly, reviewing final mission briefings. Captain James Okoro, the lead pilot, had spent 12 years preparing for a war he had never truly believed would come. He looked at the images from Hope Station, the broken dome, the survivors trapped in darkness, and felt a cold anger settle in his chest. "They didn't even give a warning," he said quietly to his fellow pilots. "They just attacked." "That's what the report says," replied Lieutenant Sophia Marchetti, the second pilot. "No warning, no first contact, just destruction." "Then that's the last mistake they'll get to make against us without paying for it," James said. The third pilot, a quiet man named David Osei, Amara's own nephew, though few knew this, said nothing, simply nodding as he checked his flight suit one final time. He had trained harder than anyone, driven by a promise he made to his aunt years earlier, that if this day ever came, he would be ready to fly. Back in orbit above the moon, Threxil Vaughn grew slightly impatient as Earth's extra day of discussion stretched on. He ordered Scree to monitor Earth's communications more closely, searching for signs of surrender preparations. Instead, Scree found something strange. "Captain," Scree said, "there are unusual energy readings coming from 3 locations on Earth's surface. Small, but unlike anything we have recorded from this species before." Threxil frowned, his yellow eyes narrowing. "Define unusual." "The energy signatures resemble compressed gravitic fields," Scree said, "similar to our own drive systems, but built differently. Cruder, perhaps, but functional." Threxil considered this information carefully. It was rare, though not unheard of, for a primitive species to have stumbled upon fragments of higher technology, usually from crashed scout ships or lost probes. It was a nuisance, but not something the Zoreth had ever considered a true threat. Every species that reached this level of understanding still lacked the numbers, the coordination, and the raw power needed to challenge a full Zoreth warship. "Continue monitoring," Threxil said, "but do not delay the surrender deadline further. 1 more day, no more." Elena Vasquez, meanwhile, had begun organizing the survivors into working teams, giving each person a task to keep their minds occupied and their bodies useful. Engineers worked on repairing what they could of the base's systems. Soldiers stood watch, though there was little they could do against a ship in orbit. Doctors treated the wounded with the limited supplies left in the shelter. Kian approached Elena late into the artificial night cycle, holding a small device in his hands. "Captain, I managed to get a partial signal from Earth. It's encrypted, but I think I can crack part of it." Elena's eyes widened slightly. "Do it." After several tense minutes, the device crackled softly, and a distorted voice came through. General Marcus Webb's voice, speaking directly to Hope Station for the first time since the attack. "Hope Station, this is General Webb. I know things look bad up there. I know you've lost people, and I know you're scared. But I need you to hold on just a little longer. Earth has not given up, and we are not going to leave you stranded. Help is coming. I can't tell you exactly what kind of help, or when, for security reasons, but I promise you, it is coming. Stay strong. Webb out." The message ended, but its effect lingered in the shelter like a warm light in the darkness. Survivors who had been sitting quietly, staring blankly at the walls, suddenly looked up, hope flickering in their tired eyes. Priya Nair, still working on the radio, allowed herself a small, tearful smile. "They're coming," she whispered. "They're really coming." Elena placed a hand on Kian's shoulder. "Good work," she said quietly. Then she turned to address the room, raising her voice so all could hear. "Earth has not forgotten us," she said. "Whatever happens next, know this. We are not alone, and we are not finished. Hold on. Help is coming." As the artificial lights dimmed for another cycle of rest, the survivors of Hope Station clung to that single promise, unaware of just how much fire and fury Earth was preparing to unleash on their behalf. Above them, the alien battleship waited patiently, confident in its power, unaware that the small blue planet below it was about to prove that some worlds simply refused to kneel. The second day of the crisis began with a message from Threxil Vaughn that carried a colder tone than before. He had grown tired of waiting. His screen showed the same demand, repeated with a warning attached. "Humans, your time is nearly finished. Give your answer now, or your homeworld will share the fate of your moon base." In the underground command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Marcus Webb watched the message with a grim expression. Beside him stood the president, along with military leaders from a dozen nations who had been brought into the secret circle of Project Hammerfall over the last 24 hours. It had taken enormous effort to convince some of them that Hammerfall was real, that Earth actually had a chance, however small, to fight back. Seeing the footage from Hope Station had helped more than any argument could. "We need to answer them," Marcus said. "But this time, our answer needs to buy us just a little more time, a few more hours. That's all we need. And if they don't give us a few more hours," asked a general from another country, his voice tense. "What then?" "Then Hammerfall launches early," Marcus said simply. "Ready or not." At Site Prometheus, Dr. Amara Osei worked with her team through the night, running final checks on the 3 Valkyrie-class warships. These ships were Earth's answer to a threat nobody had truly expected to face this soon. Each one carried weapons built from theories, developed after studying alien debris, recovered over a decade earlier. A weapon system the scientists called the fracture cannon, capable of firing a beam that did not simply burn through matter, but tore apart the very bonds holding atoms together. It was untested in real combat, but simulations suggested it could match, and possibly exceed, the power of the weapon that had destroyed Hope Station. "Report," Amara said to her second-in-command, a quiet engineer named Tomas Reyes. "All 3 ships show green across every system," Tomas said. "Fracture cannons are charged and stable. Shield generators are online. Engines are ready for immediate launch." Amara nodded, though her stomach twisted with worry. Simulations were one thing. Real battle against an enemy who had already conquered 100 worlds was something else entirely. She walked over to where the 3 pilots stood, already dressed in their flight suits, helmets tucked under their arms. "You all know what's at stake," she said to them. "I won't pretend this isn't dangerous. These ships have never fired a shot outside of a simulator. You are about to test humanity's best weapons against an enemy who has never lost a fight before." Captain James Okoro nodded firmly. "Then we'll just have to be the first ones to make them lose." Beside him, Lieutenant Sophia Marchetti tightened the straps on her flight suit. "For Hope Station," she said quietly. "For Hope Station," David Osei repeated, looking briefly at his aunt, with a small, determined smile. Amara felt her throat tighten, but she nodded back at her nephew, unable to find the words to say everything she wanted to say. Instead, she simply said, "Come back safely, all of you." The 3 pilots boarded their ships as the massive hangar doors slowly opened above them, revealing the night sky, stars scattered across the darkness, like a promise of everything still unknown, still unexplored, still worth fighting for. Meanwhile, on the surface of the moon, inside the broken shelter of Hope Station, Elena Vasquez received an unexpected transmission. It was brief, encrypted, meant only for her. "Captain Vasquez, this is General Webb. In approximately 2 hours, Earth will be launching a counterattack against the enemy vessel currently in orbit around your position. I need you and your people to move to the deepest, most protected section of the base you can find, and remain there, no matter what you see or hear. This is going to get loud." Elena read the message twice, her heart pounding. She turned to Kian, who had overheard part of the transmission over her shoulder. "They're really doing it," Kian said, disbelief and hope mixing in his voice. "They're actually fighting back." "Get everyone moving," Elena said. "Deepest shelter section, now. We don't have much time." The survivors of Hope Station moved quickly, following Elena's orders without question. They had learned, over the past 2 days, to trust her completely. As they moved deeper into the wreckage of their home, passing broken hallways and collapsed rooms, many of them glanced upward, toward the cracked ceiling, wondering what kind of battle was about to unfold above their heads. In orbit, Threxel Vaughn's patience finally ran out. Earth's response had come. Another request for delay, cloaked in polite diplomatic language that barely hid the desperation beneath it. Threxel had seen this pattern before in other species. Stall, delay, hope for a miracle that never came. He decided he would wait no longer. "Prepare the weapon," he ordered Scree. "We will destroy one of their smaller cities as a demonstration. Perhaps then they will understand the seriousness of their situation." Scree hesitated. "Captain, our sensors are picking up 3 unidentified vessels launching from the planet's surface. Small, but moving at unusual speed." Threxel's eyes narrowed. "Show me." The screen displayed 3 sleek black ships climbing rapidly out of Earth's atmosphere, their engines glowing with strange energy patterns, unlike anything the Zoreth database recognized. Threxel studied the readings carefully, his confidence unshaken. "Insignificant," he said finally. 3 ships cannot threaten a vessel of this size. Destroy them if they come too close. Continue preparations for the demonstration strike." But as the 3 Valkyrie-class ships broke through Earth's atmosphere and turned toward the moon, Captain James Okoro felt something different than fear settle over him. He felt focus. Years of training had prepared him for this exact moment, and now that it had finally arrived, his mind sharpened rather than panicked. "Formation check," he called over the comm. "Marchetti, ready," Sophia responded. "Osei, ready," David said. his voice steady, despite the tension in his chest. "Then let's go remind them why humans don't give up easily," James said, pushing his ship's throttle forward. The three ships streaked through space toward the moon, closing the distance rapidly with their advanced engines. On the Xoreth battleship, sensors tracked their approach with mild curiosity rather than alarm. No species had ever approached a Xoreth warship with anything close to a real weapon before. Every previous encounter had ended the same way: overwhelming force, quick surrender, easy conquest. As the three human ships closed within firing range, Threxil ordered a warning shot fired across their path, expecting them to retreat in fear like every other species had done in similar situations. The Xoreth ship's secondary weapon fired, a smaller version of the beam that had destroyed Hope Station, cutting through space just meters from James's ship. It was meant to frighten, not to kill, a demonstration of power, meant to force a retreat. James did not retreat. "Marchetti, Osei, spread formation," he ordered. "Target the primary weapon housing. Fire fracture cannons on my mark." The three ships spread apart, moving in patterns that had been practiced thousands of times in simulation, but never in real combat. Threxil watched this maneuver with growing surprise. These humans were not retreating, they were preparing to attack. "They intend to fight," Scree said, disbelief clear in his voice. "Impossible," Threxil said, though a flicker of uncertainty crossed his mind for the first time since arriving at this system. "No species this primitive has ever dared to engage us directly." "Mark!" James shouted. Three beams of pure destructive energy fired simultaneously from the human ships, striking the alien battleship's weapon housing with tremendous force. Unlike the standard weapons used by other species the Xoreth had encountered, the fracture cannons did not simply burn or explode against the ship's shields. They tore into the very structure of the shield itself, breaking apart the energy bonds that held it together. The Xoreth battleship shuddered violently as its shields flared bright red, straining under an attack unlike anything its systems had ever recorded. Alarms blared across the bridge. Scree stared at his monitors in shock. "Shields at 60% and falling. Weapon systems reporting damage. Captain, this is not possible." Threxil's calm demeanor cracked for the first time. "Return fire. Destroy them immediately." The battleship's main weapon turned toward the human ships, gathering energy for a devastating strike. But the three Valkyrie-class ships were already moving again, weaving through space with speed and precision that surprised even James himself, who had trained for years but never truly believed his ship could move this fast in real combat. "Evasive maneuvers," James called out. "Marchetti, OCA, stay spread out. Don't give them an easy target." The alien beam fired, missing David's ship by mere meters as he pulled into a sharp turn that pressed him hard against his seat. Sophia's ship fired another fracture cannon blast, striking the same weakened section of the enemy's shield, causing another violent shudder through the massive vessel. "Shields at 40%, Scree reported, panic creeping into his usually calm voice. "Captain, we need to retreat and regroup." "We do not retreat from primitives," Threxil snapped, though even as he said it, doubt gnawed at the edges of his confidence. In 100 conquered worlds, nothing like this had ever happened. Nobody had ever fought back with weapons capable of actually damaging a Xoreth warship's shields. On the moon below, Elena and the survivors of Hope Station huddled in the deepest section of the shelter, feeling faint vibrations through the rock and metal around them as the battle raged in orbit above. Kian monitored what little data they could still receive, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Captain, I'm picking up weapons fire," he said. "Our ships, they're actually hitting it. They're actually damaging that thing." Elena closed her eyes for a moment, feeling a wave of emotion she hadn't allowed herself to feel since the attack began. Hope, real hope, for the first time in 2 long days. "Keep monitoring," she said, her voice steady, despite the tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. "And someone find me a way to see what's happening. I want to see this." Above, the battle continued, growing more intense with each passing minute. James pushed his ship into another attack run, fracture cannon charging as he closed the distance toward the enemy battleship's damaged shield section. "One more hit should break through," he called to his team. "Marchetti, Osei, cover me. I'm going in for the final strike." "Copy that," Sophia responded, moving her ship into a defensive position, firing her own weapons to draw the battleship's attention away from James's approach. David did the same, weaving his ship through the enemy's return fire, drawing dangerous shots that came close enough to make his heart race, but he held his position, determined to give James the opening he needed. Threxil watched the human ship's approach with growing alarm, finally understanding that this was not a bluff, not a desperate final gesture from a dying species, but a genuine, calculated attack from an enemy who had somehow prepared for exactly this kind of encounter. "Divert all power to shields," he ordered. "Full power, now." But it was too late. James's ship closed the final distance, fracture cannon fully charged, and fired directly into the weakened section of the battleship's shield. The beam tore through the last of the shield's defenses and struck the hull itself, ripping a massive gash along the ship's side, venting atmosphere and debris out into the vacuum of space. The Zoreth battleship shuddered violently, alarms screaming across every deck as sections of the ship lost pressure and power. Threxil gripped the sides of his command chair, staring at the damage reports in disbelief. "Impossible," he whispered. "This is impossible." "Captain, we are losing power to primary systems," Scree shouted. "We need to retreat now, or risk complete destruction." Threxil, for the first time in his long career of conquest, felt something he had never truly felt before: fear. He looked at the human ships still circling his damaged vessel, weapons ready for another strike, and made the only decision that made sense. "Retreat," he said quietly. "Prepare emergency jump, we are leaving this system." The battleship's remaining engines flared to life, and within moments, the massive vessel began pulling away from the moon, retreating toward the edge of the solar system, where it could safely activate its jump drive and escape. James watched the enemy ship retreat, his heart pounding with a mixture of relief and disbelief. "Did we just win?" "I think we did," Sophia said, her voice shaking slightly with adrenaline. "I think we actually did." David let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, tears of relief mixing with the sweat on his face. "For Hope Station," he said quietly, echoing the words they had spoken before the battle began. On the moon, in the deepest shelter of Hope Station, Elena Vasquez received the news from Kian, with tears streaming down her dust-covered face. "They did it, Captain," Kian said, his voice breaking with emotion. "The enemy ship is retreating. We won. We actually won." Elena looked around at the survivors gathered in the shelter, exhausted, injured, but alive. She saw the boy who had asked her if the monsters would come back, now looking up with wide, hopeful eyes. "Earth kept its promise," she said softly, mostly to herself. Then, louder, so everyone could hear, "Earth kept its promise. We're safe, we're safe." Cheers erupted through the shelter, mixed with sobs of relief and disbelief. For the first time since the attack, hope had finally, truly, returned to Hope Station. But far above them, as the Xoreth battleship retreated toward the edge of the solar system, Threxil Vaughn sat in his command chair, staring at the stars ahead, his mind racing with a single, terrifying thought. This small, primitive planet had just done what no other species in 100 conquered worlds had ever managed to do. They had hurt him, and somewhere far across the galaxy, the Xoreth Empire would need to know exactly what kind of threat this strange blue planet truly represented. This was not the end of the war. It was only the beginning. Back on Earth, in the underground command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Marcus Webb watched the final moments of the battle through a shaky video feed relayed from the Valkyrie-class ships. When the enemy battleship's retreat was confirmed, a wave of stunned silence fell over the room, followed by a sudden burst of cheering and relieved laughter from officers who had spent 2 days preparing for what many privately believed would be humanity's final stand. "They're retreating," Marcus said, almost unable to believe his own words. "The alien ship is actually retreating." The president, standing beside him, let out a long breath she had been holding for what felt like hours. "Get me Dr. Osei," she said. "I want to know everything about those ships, and I want to know how fast we can build more of them." At Site Prometheus, Amara Osei received the news with tears in her eyes, relief flooding through her body as she watched the telemetry data confirm that all 3 Valkyrie-class ships remained intact and were now returning safely to Earth's orbit for repairs and refueling. "They made it," she whispered to Tomas Reyes, who stood beside her, equally stunned. 15 years of work, and they actually made it. The fracture cannons performed exactly as the simulations predicted, Tomas said, scrolling through the incoming data with growing excitement. Better, actually. The enemy shields were far weaker against our weapons than we expected. Amara nodded, though a small worry nagged at the back of her mind. This was one ship, she said quietly. A scout, maybe. Or an early probe, sent to test our defenses. If the Zoreth truly control 100 worlds, as the intercepted signal suggested, this was likely just the beginning of their interest in us. We need to prepare for much more than this. Tomas frowned. You think they'll come back? I know they will, Amara said. No empire loses this easily and simply walks away. They'll come back, and next time, they'll bring more than one ship. As the 3 Valkyrie-class ships approached Earth's atmosphere, James Okoro allowed himself a rare moment of relief, his hands finally relaxing on the controls after hours of tense combat. Behind him, in the following ships, Sophia Marchetti and David Osei felt similar waves of exhaustion wash over their bodies, the adrenaline of battle slowly fading into simple, human tiredness. We did it, Sophia said over the comm, her voice still shaking slightly. I can't believe we actually did it. Don't celebrate too much yet, James replied, though there was warmth in his voice, despite the caution in his words. That thing is still out there somewhere, and Amara's right. It won't be the last one we see. David remained quiet for a long moment before speaking. We saved Hope Station, he finally said. Whatever comes next, we saved them. That has to count for something. It counts for everything, James said firmly. Now let's get home, patch up these ships, and get ready for round 2. As the ships descended toward Earth, breaking through the atmosphere in trails of fire, people across the planet who had been secretly informed of the crisis watched news broadcasts with a mixture of fear and cautious hope. Governments had not yet revealed the full truth to their populations, only vague reports of an unidentified incident near the moon, with reassurances that the situation was under control. But word was beginning to spread, quietly, through unofficial channels, that something extraordinary had happened above their heads. Something that had, for the first time in human history, proven that Earth was not entirely defenseless against threats from beyond the stars. On the moon, the survivors of Hope Station began the slow process of rebuilding what they could of their broken home, waiting for rescue ships to arrive and carry them back to Earth. Elena Vasquez walked through the wreckage of the base one final time, her boots crunching over broken glass and scattered debris, looking at the remains of the life she had built there over 6 years. She stopped at what remained of the school dome, now nothing more than twisted metal frames and shattered glass scattered across the gray dust. She remembered the children who had once laughed and played within its walls, remembered the ones who had not survived the attack, and felt a heavy weight settle in her chest. We'll rebuild, Kian said, standing beside her, following her gaze toward the ruined dome. Once this is all over, we'll rebuild Hope Station, even better than before. Elena nodded slowly. We will, she said. But first, we finish this fight. For everyone we lost, for everyone still here, we finish it. As rescue ships finally began arriving from Earth, carrying medical teams and emergency supplies, Elena watched the survivors being carefully loaded aboard, wrapped in blankets, some carried on stretchers, others walking slowly, with the help of soldiers and engineers. She made sure every single person was accounted for before finally boarding the last ship herself, taking one final look back at the broken base that had once been her home. Far above Earth's atmosphere, the 3 Valkyrie-class ships landed safely at Site Prometheus, greeted by cheering crowds of scientists and engineers who had spent years building toward this exact moment. James, Sophia, and David stepped out of their ships to applause and relieved embraces, their bodies exhausted but their spirits lifted by the knowledge that their sacrifice, their years of secret training, had finally proven worthwhile. Amara Osei ran to her nephew, wrapping him in a tight embrace, tears streaming freely down her face. You did it, she whispered. You actually did it. David hugged her back tightly. We did it together, he said. All of us. Everyone who worked on this project, everyone who believed this day might come, and prepared for it anyway. That evening, as the full details of the battle were finally shared with world leaders, a new kind of urgency settled over the planet's defense strategies. The immediate crisis had been survived, but everyone in the room understood that this was merely a single skirmish in what could become a much larger war. The Xorith Empire, wherever it truly stretched across the stars, would not simply forget the humiliation of a retreating warship. "We need more ships," Marcus Webb said during the late-night briefing. "More pilots, more weapons, more everything. If they come back, and I believe they will, we need to be ready for a fight far bigger than 3 ships against 1 battleship." Amara nodded in agreement. "Site Prometheus can begin mass production immediately," she said. "But it will take time. Months, at least, before we have a fleet capable of truly defending this planet." "Then we use that time wisely," the president said. "Every nation on this planet needs to come together now, more than ever before. This isn't a fight any single country can win alone." As the meeting continued late into the night, planning the next steps for humanity's defense, Elena Vasquez and the survivors of Hope Station finally arrived back on Earth, greeted by medical teams and quiet, solemn recognition from the small circle of officials, aware of the true scale of what had happened. Elena stepped off the rescue ship onto solid ground, feeling the familiar pull of Earth's gravity beneath her feet for the first time in years, and allowed herself, finally, a single moment of exhausted relief. The war had only just begun, but for now, at least, Earth still stood. And somewhere out among the stars, an alien empire was about to learn that humanity, when pushed hard enough, refused to break. 3 months passed after the battle above the moon, and Earth changed faster than it ever had in its long history. The secret was no longer fully secret. Governments across the world, working together for the first time in true unity, had slowly revealed parts of the truth to their people. Careful, controlled information, meant to prepare humanity without causing total panic. People learned that Earth had been attacked, that an alien ship had destroyed part of a moon base, and that human ships had fought back and won. The full details of Project Hammerfall remained hidden, but the public knew enough to understand one simple fact. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and the universe was not friendly. At Site Prometheus, the hangars that once held only 3 prototype warships now stretched for miles underground, filled with rows of Valkyrie-class ships in various stages of construction. What had been a secret project known to only a handful of people had become the largest cooperative effort in human history, with nations that had once been rivals, now working side by side, sharing resources, technology, and knowledge in a desperate race to prepare for whatever came next. Dr. Amara Osei walked through the massive assembly hall, watching workers from a dozen different countries moving in careful coordination, building ship after ship using improved designs based on data gathered from the first battle. The fracture cannon technology had been refined, made more powerful and more efficient. Shield systems had been strengthened using new materials discovered through continued study of the alien debris recovered years earlier. "We're producing 1 new ship every 3 days now," Tomas Reyes reported, walking beside her with a datapad in hand. "At this rate, we'll have a fleet of 50 Valkyrie-class ships within the next 2 months." "It's still not enough," Amara said, though there was a note of cautious optimism in her voice. "If they come back with more than 1 battleship, 50 ships might not be sufficient." "It's more than we had 3 months ago," Tomas replied, "and it's growing every single day." Captain James Okoro had been promoted to lead the newly formed Earth Defense Fleet, training new pilots recruited from air forces and space programs around the world. He stood before a group of eager young recruits, all of them volunteers who had stepped forward once the truth of Earth's situation became known. "Every one of you is here because you believe Earth is worth defending," James said, addressing the recruits in a large training hall filled with flight simulators. "I won't lie to you. What's coming might be worse than what we already faced, but we proved something important 3 months ago. We proved that Earth doesn't have to accept defeat just because the enemy looks stronger." Sophia Marchetti, now serving as James's second-in-command, walked among the recruits, checking their equipment and answering questions with the patience of someone who understood exactly what these young pilots were about to face. David Osei had taken on the role of training officer, teaching new pilots the specific techniques that had allowed the first 3 ships to defeat a battleship far larger than anything humans had ever built. "Remember," David told a group of trainees during a simulation exercise, "their shields are strong, but not perfect. Focus your fire, don't spread it thin. Work as a team, always. No single ship can win this fight alone, no matter how good the pilot is. Meanwhile, far across the galaxy, in a system many light-years from Earth, Threxel Vaughn stood before the ruling council of the Zoreth Empire, explaining what had happened during his mission to the small blue planet. The council chamber was vast, filled with representatives from 100 conquered worlds who now served the Zoreth as advisors, translators, and administrators. At the center sat the Grand Overseer, an ancient Zoreth named Calvex Doru, whose glowing yellow eyes studied Threxel with cold, calculating patience. "You are telling us," Calvex said slowly, "that a single ship, damaged by 3 primitive vessels, was forced to retreat from an unconquered world." "Yes, Grand Overseer," Threxel admitted, his usual confidence noticeably absent. "Their weapons were unlike anything in our records. Capable of breaking through our shields with efficiency we have never encountered before." Murmurs spread through the council chamber. Never before, in the long history of Zoreth conquest, had a single warship been forced to retreat from a world still in the early stages of space exploration. Calvex studied Threxel carefully, considering the implications of this unprecedented failure. "This changes our approach," Calvex finally said. "We cannot allow this species to continue developing whatever technology allowed them to damage one of our warships. Send a larger fleet. Not 1 ship, but 10. Overwhelming force, applied immediately, before they can prepare further defenses." Threxel bowed his head slightly. "It will be done, Grand Overseer. I will lead the fleet myself, to correct my previous failure." "See that you do," Calvex said coldly. "The Empire does not tolerate weakness, Threxel Vaughn. Conquer this world, or do not return at all." Back on Earth, 3 months of preparation continued at a frantic pace. Elena Vasquez, having recovered from the physical and emotional wounds of the attack on Hope Station, had volunteered to join the newly formed Earth Defense Fleet as a strategic advisor, drawing on her experience commanding the moon base during the crisis. She sat in on planning meetings alongside Marcus Webb, Amara Osei, and representatives from nations around the world, helping develop strategies for the battles that everyone now believed were inevitably coming. "If they return with more ships," Elena said during one such meeting, "we need more than just better weapons. We need better coordination, better communication between our ships, and contingency plans if our primary defense fails." "Agreed," Marcus said, studying a large tactical display showing simulated battle scenarios based on data from the first encounter. "We're also working on early warning systems, expanded sensor networks that can detect ships even when they try to hide their approach, using whatever technology let that first ship appear seemingly out of nowhere." Amara nodded. "Our scientists have made progress there as well. We believe the technology the Xoreth use to hide their approach relies on bending light around their ship's hull. We've developed sensors that can detect the gravitational distortion this creates, even if the ship itself remains invisible to normal observation." "Good," Marcus said. "Every advantage counts. We don't know when they'll return, or how many ships they'll bring. We need to be ready for anything." As the weeks continued to pass, the Earth Defense Fleet grew stronger. New pilots trained rigorously, learning combat techniques that combined traditional military strategy with the unique capabilities of their advanced ships. Scientists continued refining weapons and shields, incorporating lessons learned from the first battle into every new vessel produced. Nations that had once argued over borders and resources now worked together, with a shared purpose that had never before existed in human history. James Okoro pushed his pilots hard during training exercises, running simulation after simulation, preparing them for scenarios far more dangerous than the single battleship they had faced 3 months earlier. He personally reviewed footage from that first battle repeatedly, studying every movement, every decision, searching for ways to improve their tactics even further. "If they bring 10 ships instead of 1, he told his pilots during a briefing, "we can't rely on the same tactics that worked before. We need new strategies, new formations, ways to divide their attention and pick apart their fleet piece by piece." Sofia Marchetti had developed a new tactical formation during this period, one that used smaller groups of ships working in coordinated waves, rather than simple direct confrontation. "If we hit them from multiple directions simultaneously," she explained during a strategy session, "we force them to divide their shields and weapons across multiple threats at once. That gives us more opportunities to find and exploit weak points." David Osei, meanwhile, had taken a particular interest in studying the recovered alien technology more closely, working alongside Amara's science team to better understand exactly how Zorith's shields and weapons functioned. His research led to several important discoveries that would prove crucial in the battles to come. Their shields regenerate over time, David explained during a technical briefing. But there's a delay, a brief window after taking heavy damage, where the shield's regeneration rate drops significantly. If we can time our attacks to hit during that window, we can cause much more damage than a single strike alone. Amara listened carefully, adding David's findings to the growing body of knowledge Earth had gathered about their alien enemy. "This is exactly the kind of advantage we need," she said. "Every piece of information helps us prepare better, fight smarter, survive longer." 6 months after the first battle, Earth's defenses had grown substantially stronger than anyone could have imagined possible in such a short time. The Earth Defense Fleet now numbered over 100 Valkyrie-class ships, crewed by pilots trained specifically for combat against the Zorith threat. Early warning sensor networks stretched across the solar system, watching for any sign of the enemy's return. Nations around the world had united under a single command structure, setting aside old rivalries in favor of humanity's shared survival. Elena Vasquez, now serving as a senior strategic advisor to the newly formed United Earth Defense Council, stood before a large gathering of military leaders and scientists, presenting updated defense strategies based on months of careful preparation. "But we can be certain that when they do, they will not underestimate us again. They will come prepared for a real fight, likely with more ships than before, better strategies, stronger resolve to finish what they started." Marcus Webb, now serving as the overall commander of Earth's combined military forces, nodded in agreement. "Which is exactly why we cannot afford to relax, even for a moment. Every day we have, without their return, is another day we use to prepare further. Every ship we build, every pilot we train, every piece of technology we develop, brings us one step closer to being ready for whatever comes next." As the meeting continued, discussing further preparations and contingency plans, none of them yet knew that far across the galaxy, Threxel Vaughn's fleet of 10 warships had already begun its journey toward Earth, driven by a Grand Overseer's cold demand for conquest and a captain's desperate need to redeem his previous failure. The peace Earth currently enjoyed was temporary, a brief pause before a storm, far larger than anything humanity had yet faced. But for the first time since the attack on Hope Station, humanity did not wait for that storm in fear and uncertainty. They waited prepared, united, and ready to fight for their home, with everything they had built and learned over 6 months of tireless preparation. Somewhere in the depths of space, 10 Gorith warships moved steadily closer to the solar system, their combined weapons more powerful than anything Earth had yet faced. Threxel Vaughn stood at the command bridge of his flagship, watching the stars ahead with grim determination, unaware that the primitive planet he intended to conquer had transformed itself, in just 6 short months, into something far more dangerous than he could possibly imagine. The next battle would not be a simple skirmish between 1 ship and 3. It would be a true war, fought with everything both sides could bring to the fight, and this time, both sides intended to win, at any cost. During those 6 months of preparation, life on Earth had changed in ways both large and small. Cities that had once been divided by borders now shared resources freely, sending steel, fuel, and skilled workers to wherever the defense fleet needed them most. Schools began teaching children about the reality of life beyond Earth, preparing a new generation to understand that humanity's future would always now include the stars, whether that future brought danger or opportunity. Elena Vasquez often thought back to the children she had comforted in the shelter on the moon, wondering how they were adjusting to a world that had changed so completely in such a short time. She made a point of visiting hospitals and community centers whenever her duties allowed, checking on survivors from Hope Station who were slowly rebuilding their lives on Earth. The boy who had asked her if the monsters would return had been placed with a foster family in Nairobi, and Elena visited him personally whenever she could, bringing small gifts and reassurance that the adults of Earth were doing everything possible to keep him safe. "Are we ready this time?" the boy asked her during one such visit, his eyes older and more serious than they had been 6 months earlier. "We're more ready than we've ever been," Elena told him honestly. "Better ships, better weapons, brave people working together from every country on Earth. Whatever comes, we won't face it unprepared again. The boy nodded, seeming to find comfort in her words, though Elena herself carried the weight of knowing that no amount of preparation could ever fully erase the uncertainty of facing an enemy from beyond the stars. At Site Prometheus, the pace of ship production continued to accelerate as new manufacturing techniques were developed and shared across the growing network of facilities now operating in secret locations across 6 continents. Amara Osei had expanded her original team from a small group of dedicated scientists into a massive research division employing thousands of engineers, physicists, and technicians from every corner of the globe. "We've made a breakthrough," Tomas Reyes told her one afternoon, rushing into her office with visible excitement. "The new shield harmonics we've been testing, they're not just stronger, they actually adapt to incoming attacks in real time. If the Xoreth try to overwhelm our shields with repeated strikes to the same location, the system will automatically redistribute energy to compensate." Amara studied the data on his tablet carefully, a small smile forming on her tired face. "This could make a real difference," she said. "How soon can we implement this across the fleet?" "We're already retrofitting the existing ships," Tomas said. "Full deployment across all 100 vessels within 3 weeks." Amara nodded, feeling a small measure of relief amid the constant pressure of preparation. Every improvement, no matter how small, brought Earth one step closer to standing a real chance against whatever the Xoreth Empire chose to send next. James Okoro, meanwhile, continued refining combat tactics with his growing fleet of trained pilots. He had begun running joint exercises between different squadrons, testing how well pilots from different countries and backgrounds could coordinate under pressure. The results had been encouraging, though James remained cautious about overconfidence. "Good work today," he told a group of pilots after a particularly successful simulation exercise involving 50 ships working in coordinated formations. "But remember, simulations are not real combat. When the moment comes, things will not go exactly as planned. Stay adaptable. Trust your training. Trust each other. And above all, don't panic." Sofia Marchetti had taken on additional responsibilities, training new squadron leaders, passing along the tactical innovations she had developed since the first battle. She found particular satisfaction in mentoring younger pilots, many of whom reminded her of herself, before the war had forced her to grow up faster than she ever expected. "You did well today," she told a young pilot named Marcus Chen, after a difficult training exercise. "Your instincts are good, trust them more." "Thank you, Lieutenant," Marcus Chen replied, still slightly out of breath from the intense simulation. "It's hard not to think about what happened at Hope Station. Knowing what's really out there." Sophia placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "That fear is normal," she said. "Use it. Let it sharpen your focus rather than freeze you. That's what separates a good pilot from a great one." David Osei continued his research into Xoreth technology, working closely with a small team of specialists who had been studying every piece of data gathered from the first encounter. His discovery about the shield regeneration delay had proven so valuable that he was given expanded resources to continue searching for similar advantages. "I think I've found something else," he told Amara during one of their regular research meetings. Looking at the energy patterns from their main weapon, there seems to be a brief moment right after firing when their power systems are vulnerable. If we can strike during that exact window, we might be able to disable their main weapon entirely, rather than just damaging their shields. Amara reviewed his data carefully, impressed once again by her nephew's dedication and insight. "This is exactly the kind of edge we need," she said. "Keep working on this. If you're right, this could change everything about how we approach the next battle." As months passed and preparations continued, the United Earth Defense Council also worked to address concerns beyond simply building ships and training pilots. Diplomats and scientists worked together to prepare contingency plans for worst-case scenarios, including evacuation procedures for major cities and emergency shelters designed to protect civilians in case Earth's orbital defenses failed to stop an attack. "We need to prepare for every possibility," Marcus Webb insisted during council meetings. "Not because we expect to fail, but because true preparation means planning even for the outcomes we hope never happen." Elena Vasquez helped develop these contingency plans, drawing on her first-hand experience of surviving an actual alien attack. "The most important thing," she emphasized repeatedly during planning sessions, "is clear communication with the public. People need to know what to do, where to go, and how to stay calm if the worst happens. Panic kills more people than the actual attack often does. Slowly, as the 6-month mark approached, a strange new normal settled over Earth. Life continued, businesses operated, children went to school, but underneath the surface of everyday activity, an unprecedented level of cooperation and preparation continued around the clock. Nations shared intelligence freely, resources flowed to wherever they were needed most urgently, and high above the planet, an ever-growing fleet of advanced warships stood ready, waiting for a threat that everyone knew, with growing certainty, would eventually return. Threxel Vaughn's fleet continued its journey across the vast distances of space, 10 warships moving in tight formation, their combined might representing the largest force ever assembled to conquer a single world. Threxel spent long hours reviewing data from the first encounter, studying every detail of the human ship's capabilities, searching for weaknesses he could exploit when the fleet finally arrived at its destination. "We will not underestimate them again," he told his assembled captains during a briefing aboard his flagship. "Whatever technology allowed those 3 ships to damage my vessel, we must assume they have continued to develop and improve upon it. We attack with overwhelming force, from multiple directions simultaneously, giving them no opportunity to concentrate their unusual weapons against any single vessel." The other Zoreth captains listened intently, understanding clearly the stakes involved. Failure against a primitive world would bring shame, not just to Threxel, but to the entire fleet, and potentially invite questioning of the Empire's supposedly unstoppable might from other conquered worlds, who might see opportunity in Zoreth weakness. As the fleet drew closer to the solar system, Earth's expanded sensor network finally detected the first signs of their approach. Faint gravitational distortions, far beyond the orbit of Neptune, growing stronger with each passing day. The United Earth Defense Council convened an emergency meeting the moment the readings were confirmed. "They're coming," Marcus Webb announced grimly to the assembled leaders. "Current estimates suggest 10 vessels, larger combined force than anything we've previously encountered. Estimated arrival time, 72 hours. The room fell silent as the weight of this information settled over everyone present. 6 months of preparation had led to this exact moment, and now, finally, the true test of Earth's defenses was about to begin. "All fleets to battle stations," Marcus ordered firmly. "This is not a drill. This is the fight we've been preparing for. Let's show them exactly what humanity is capable of when we stand together." Across the solar system, alarms began to sound as the Earth Defense Fleet mobilized for what everyone understood would be the largest, most important battle in human history. The peace that had settled over the past 6 months was finally, truly over. The next chapter of humanity's fight for survival was about to begin. 72 hours passed like a held breath across the entire planet. In command centers around the world, military leaders watched sensor readings grow stronger as the Xoreth fleet approached the edge of the solar system. In sight Prometheus, the last of the Valkyrie-class ships completed final preparations, their crews checking weapons, shields, and engines one final time, before the battle that everyone knew was coming. Elena Vasquez stood in the main command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, watching the tactical display with quiet intensity. 10 red markers moved steadily across the screen, representing the approaching Xoreth fleet. Around her, officers from a dozen nations worked together seamlessly, coordinating the largest defensive effort in human history. 10 ships confirmed, said a young officer monitoring the sensor arrays. Formation appears tight, likely designed for mutual shield support. Marcus Webb studied the display carefully, his weathered face showing the strain of 6 months spent preparing for this exact moment. "James, are your pilots ready?" Through a video feed from Site Prometheus, James Okoro nodded firmly. 120 ships, fully fueled, fully armed, and ready to launch on your order, General. "Then let's not keep them waiting," Marcus said. "All fleets, prepare for immediate deployment. This is it. Everything we've worked for comes down to the next few hours." Across the solar system, the Earth Defense Fleet launched from bases hidden across every continent, over 100 sleek black ships rising into the darkness of space, forming into the coordinated formations that James, Sophia, and their fellow commanders had spent 6 months perfecting. Elena watched from the command center as the fleet assembled, feeling a mixture of pride and fear that she suspected everyone in the room shared. James Okoro led the fleet from the front, his ship at the head of the formation, as they moved to intercept the approaching Zoreth vessels near the orbit of Jupiter, far enough from Earth to fight without risking civilian populations if the battle went poorly. "All squadrons, this is command," James said over the fleet-wide comm. "We've trained for this moment for 6 months. Trust your training, trust each other, and remember why we're here. For Hope Station, for Earth, for everyone counting on us to protect this planet." A chorus of acknowledgments echoed back from squadron leaders across the fleet, voices steady despite the tension everyone felt, as the Zoreth ships finally came into visual range. 10 massive vessels arranged in a tight defensive formation, their combined weapons far more powerful than anything Earth had faced before. Aboard his flagship, Threxil Vaughn studied the approaching human fleet with grim satisfaction. "They've grown bolder since our last encounter," he observed to Scree, who now served as his tactical officer for this crucial mission. 120 vessels, Scree reported, far more than the 3 we encountered previously, but still smaller than our own fleet's combined firepower. "Numbers alone will not determine this battle," Threxil said. "We've studied their previous tactics carefully. This time, we will not allow them to concentrate their attacks against a single weak point." As the 2 fleets closed the remaining distance, both sides prepared for what would become the largest battle in human history. James gave the final order, his voice carrying steady confidence despite the enormous stakes involved. "All squadrons, engage." The Earth Defense Fleet surged forward, splitting into the coordinated wave formations Sophia had developed during months of training. Rather than attacking as a single group, the human ships divided into smaller squadrons, striking from multiple angles simultaneously, forcing the Zoreth fleet to divide their attention and firepower across numerous threats at once. The first exchange of weapons fire lit up the darkness of space with brilliant flashes of energy. Fracture cannons tore through the vacuum, striking against Zoreth shields that flared bright red under the impact. The Zoreth ships returned fire with their own devastating beams, forcing human pilots into evasive maneuvers that tested every hour of their extensive training. "Squadron 3, converge on the lead vessel," Sophia called out, coordinating her group's attack against one of the Zoreth ships that had drifted slightly out of formation. "Focus fire on the shield generator, same tactic as before." 6 human ships converged their fire against a single point on the enemy vessel's shield, exploiting the vulnerability David had discovered months earlier. The shield flared dangerously, weakening under the concentrated assault, but this time the Zoreth ship's crew reacted quickly, redistributing power to reinforce the failing section before it could be breached. "They've adapted," Sophia realized, gritting her teeth as she pulled her ship into a sharp evasive turn to avoid incoming fire. "They're not falling for the same trick twice." Elsewhere in the battle, David Osei led his own squadron against a different target, searching for the specific timing window he had identified in his research, the brief vulnerability that occurred immediately after a Zoreth vessel fired its main weapon. He watched carefully as his target ship's weapon charged and fired at a nearby human vessel, then immediately gave the order. "Now, fire now." His squadron unleashed a concentrated volley, precisely during the vulnerable window, and this time, the results were dramatically different. The Zoreth ship's shields flickered and failed entirely for several crucial seconds, allowing David's fracture cannon to strike directly against the exposed hull, tearing a massive gash along its side. "Direct hit," David called out, watching as the damaged Zoreth vessel began venting atmosphere and drifting out of formation. "The timing window works. Pass the word to all squadrons." Sophia received the updated tactical information and adjusted her own squadron's approach, watching carefully for the telltale energy surge that indicated an enemy ship had just fired its main weapon. When she spotted the pattern, she gave the order immediately. "Fire now. Full volley." Her squadron's combined attack struck during the vulnerable window, and another Zoreth ship's shields failed momentarily, allowing devastating damage to be dealt to its hull. Slowly, methodically, the human fleet began adapting their tactics in real time, sharing information across squadrons, learning and improving even as the battle raged around them. Aboard his flagship, Threxil watched with growing alarm as 2 of his ships suffered serious damage in quick succession. "How are they doing this?" he demanded, watching the tactical display with disbelief. "This is not simple luck." "They appear to have identified a specific vulnerability in our weapon systems," Scree reported, studying the pattern of successful human attacks. A brief period of reduced shield capacity immediately following weapon discharge. Threxel's expression darkened with fury and grudging respect. "Order all ships to stagger their weapon fire," he commanded. "No two vessels fire at exactly the same moment. We cannot allow them to predict our vulnerabilities so easily." The Zoreth fleet adjusted their tactics, staggering their weapon fire to avoid creating predictable patterns for the human ships to exploit. The battle grew increasingly complex, both sides adapting continuously, searching for any advantage that might turn the tide in their favor. On Earth, in the command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, Elena watched the battle unfold through data relayed from the fleet's sensors, her heart racing with each reported hit, each ship lost, each small victory or setback that shaped the ongoing conflict. "We're losing ships," Marcus said grimly, watching as several human vessels were destroyed by concentrated Zoreth fire. "But we're damaging theirs too. This is a real fight, not a one-sided slaughter." "James's people are adapting faster than the enemy," Elena observed, studying the tactical patterns emerging from the battle data. "Every time the Zoreth adjust their tactics, our pilots find a new way to exploit their formations." The battle continued for hours, neither side gaining a decisive advantage, both fleets suffering losses as the conflict raged across the space near Jupiter's orbit. James Okoro, exhausted but determined, continued coordinating his forces, watching as both sides slowly wore each other down through countless small engagements and tactical adjustments. "Command, this is Okoro," James said, his voice tight with strain after hours of continuous combat. "We've destroyed 3 of their ships, damaged 4 more severely, but we've lost 18 of our own. This is not sustainable at current rates." Marcus studied the numbers carefully, understanding the grim mathematics of the ongoing battle. "What do you need to turn this around?" "A moment of surprise," James said. "Something they haven't prepared for. Do we have anything left in reserve?" Amara Osei, listening from Site Prometheus, suddenly spoke up over the comm. "The prototype weapon," she said urgently. "The one we've been testing but never deployed. It's risky, unproven in real combat, but it might be exactly what you need." "Explain," Marcus said quickly. "We've developed a modified fracture cannon designed for a single, massive discharge rather than sustained fire," Amara explained rapidly. "It requires channeling almost all of a ship's power into a single shot, leaving the vessel temporarily vulnerable afterward. But the resulting blast could potentially cripple even their flagship in a single strike." James considered this information carefully, weighing the risks against the increasingly desperate situation of the ongoing battle. "How many ships have this capability?" "Only the original 3 prototypes," Amara said. "Yours, Marchetti's, and Osei's ships were built with the necessary power conduits. We never had time to retrofit the newer vessels." James made his decision quickly. "Sophia, David, converge on my position. We're going to try something new." The 3 original pilots, who had fought together in humanity's first battle against the Zoreth, regrouped amid the chaos of the ongoing conflict, moving toward Threxel's flagship, which remained protected at the center of the Zoreth formation, its shields reinforced by the surrounding vessels. "This is going to be dangerous," James warned his 2 companions as they approached their target. "Once we fire, our ships will be defenseless for several seconds. We need to time this perfectly, and trust the rest of the fleet to protect us during that window." "We've trusted each other this far," Sophia said firmly. "Let's finish this." David nodded in silent agreement, his hands steady on the controls despite the danger of what they were about to attempt. James relayed the plan to the rest of the fleet, requesting immediate support to protect the 3 ships during their vulnerable moment after firing. Squadron leaders across the battle quickly redirected available ships to provide cover, understanding the critical importance of this single, decisive strike. "All ships, protect our position," James ordered. "We need 30 seconds after firing. Buy us that time, no matter what it costs." The 3 modified Valkyrie-class ships broke away from the main battle, moving directly toward Threxel's heavily defended flagship. Zoreth escort vessels immediately moved to intercept, but human squadrons converged rapidly to screen their approach, engaging the escort ships in fierce, close-range combat to clear a path. Threxel watched the 3 human ships approaching with growing alarm, recognizing them as the same vessels that had damaged his ship during their first encounter. "Concentrate all defensive fire on those 3 vessels," he ordered urgently. Do not let them get within range. But the human escort ships fought desperately, sacrificing themselves in some cases to block incoming fire, buying precious seconds for James, Sophia, and David to close the final distance toward their target. Powering up, James announced, feeling his ship's systems strain under the enormous energy demands of the experimental weapon. Charging in 10 seconds. Sophia and David matched his preparations, their own ships beginning the same dangerous power surge, channeling nearly everything into a single, devastating shot. 5 seconds, James called out, watching as enemy fire grew increasingly intense around their position, held back only by the desperate efforts of their fellow pilots. 3 seconds. Threxil's flagship turned its main weapon toward the approaching threat, preparing to fire before the human ships could complete their own attack. Fire. 3 massive beams of concentrated energy, far more powerful than any fracture cannon shot fired previously, converged simultaneously on Threxil's flagship. The combined impact overwhelmed the ship's shields entirely, tearing through layers of defense that had protected the vessel throughout the entire battle, and struck directly against the ship's core power systems. The resulting explosion lit up the darkness of space, a brilliant flash visible even from Earth's most powerful telescopes. Threxil's flagship, the largest and most powerful vessel in the entire Zoreth fleet, shuddered violently as its main systems failed catastrophically, power flickering and dying across the massive ship. "Direct hit!" James shouted, his ship drifting powerless in the aftermath of the massive discharge, completely vulnerable to enemy fire. "Command, we need immediate support, all power reserves depleted." Human escort ships rushed to protect the 3 drifting vessels, forming a protective barrier, as the remaining Zoreth fleet, suddenly leaderless and disorganized without their flagship's guidance, began to falter in their coordinated attacks. Aboard the crippled flagship, Threxil struggled to maintain control as emergency systems flickered weakly around him. "Status report," he demanded, his voice strained with barely controlled panic. "Main power failing, Captain," Scree reported, his own voice shaking with fear. "Weapons offline, shields at minimal capacity. We cannot continue this engagement." Threxil stared at the tactical display, watching as his fleet, suddenly without clear direction, began suffering increasingly heavy losses as human ships pressed their advantage against the disorganized Zoreth formation. "All remaining ships, retreat," Threxil finally ordered, his voice heavy with the bitter taste of defeat. "We cannot win this engagement. Prepare emergency jump coordinates immediately." The remaining Zoreth vessels, 7 ships still functional after the intense battle, began pulling back from the fight, their retreat covered by desperate rearguard actions, as they prepared to escape the solar system entirely. James, still recovering aboard his powerless ship, watched the enemy retreat with exhausted relief. "Command, this is Okoro. The enemy fleet is retreating. I repeat, the enemy fleet is retreating." Cheers erupted across the command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, as the tactical display confirmed the Zoreth ships withdrawing from the battle, their coordinated assault broken by the loss of their flagship and its commanding officer's leadership. Elena Vasquez allowed herself a moment of quiet relief, watching the retreating red markers on the display, with a mixture of exhaustion and cautious hope. "They're really leaving," she said softly. "For now," Marcus Webb replied, though there was genuine relief evident in his voice as well. "Get our people home safely. We'll assess the full cost of this victory once everyone is accounted for." As rescue ships moved out to recover damaged vessels and wounded pilots, the true scale of the battle's cost became clear. 31 human ships destroyed, dozens more damaged, but the Zoreth fleet had suffered even more severely. 3 ships completely destroyed, their flagship crippled beyond immediate repair, and the remaining vessels retreating in clear disarray. James Okoro, Sophia Marchetti, and David Osei were recovered safely, their ships towed back to Site Prometheus for repairs, their bodies exhausted, but their spirits lifted by the knowledge that their desperate gamble had paid off in the most crucial moment of the battle. But even as celebrations began quietly across Earth's command centers, everyone understood that this victory, while significant, did not mean the war was truly over. The Zoreth Empire had lost a battle, but empires that had conquered 100 worlds did not simply give up after a single defeat. Somewhere far across the galaxy, the Grand Overseer would soon learn of this humiliation, and Earth's leaders knew, with grim certainty, that an even larger response would eventually follow. The war for humanity's survival had reached its most critical turning point, but the final chapter had yet to be written. In the hours following the battle, medical teams worked tirelessly at Site Prometheus, treating wounded pilots and crew members who had returned from the fight. James Okoro sat on the edge of a medical bed, allowing a doctor to check the minor burns on his arms from when his ship's console had overloaded during the final moments of the desperate attack run against Threxel's flagship. "You did good work out there," the doctor said, applying a cooling gel to James's injured skin. "All three of you. The whole fleet is talking about what you did." James winced slightly at the treatment, though his mind remained focused on the battle rather than his injuries. "We got lucky," he said quietly. "If their escort ships had been just slightly faster, if our people hadn't held that line long enough, we wouldn't be having this conversation." "Luck and skill aren't always so different," the doctor replied. "You trained for this moment for years. That preparation is what made the difference, not luck." Nearby, Sophia Marchetti sat with her arm in a temporary sling, having suffered a minor fracture when her ship absorbed a glancing hit during the retreat. She watched David Osei being treated for smoke inhalation after his ship's life support system had briefly failed following the massive energy discharge. "How many did we lose?" Sophia asked quietly, dreading the answer she knew was coming. A communications officer, passing through the medical bay with updated casualty reports, paused to answer her question. 31 ships destroyed, Lieutenant. 62 pilots and crew members confirmed dead, with another 15 still listed as missing. Sophia closed her eyes for a moment, absorbing the weight of this loss. 31 ships, 62 lives, real people with families, friends, dreams for a future that had ended in the cold vacuum of space, fighting to protect a planet that most of them would never fully understand the true danger of. "They didn't die for nothing," David said quietly, having overheard the exchange despite his own injuries. "We won. Threxel's fleet retreated. Whatever comes next, we bought Earth more time to prepare." "I know," Sophia said softly. "That doesn't make it hurt less." At Site Prometheus's main hangar, Amara Osei walked slowly among the damaged ships being brought in for repair, examining the scars of battle etched into hulls that had, just hours earlier, been Earth's primary line of defense against an alien invasion. She paused at one particularly badly damaged vessel, its pilot having been among those who did not survive the battle. "Lieutenant Chen," she said quietly, reading the nameplate still visible on the ship's exterior. Marcus Chen, the young pilot Sophia had mentored during training, had died holding the line against Zoreth escort ships, buying precious seconds for the final attack against Threxel's flagship to succeed. Amara made a mental note to personally attend his memorial service, along with those of every other pilot who had given their lives in the battle. She had spent 15 years building weapons and ships for a war she hoped would never come, and now that it had arrived, the human cost of that necessity weighed heavily on her conscience, despite the undeniable victory achieved. Back in the command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, Marcus Webb and Elena Vasquez reviewed the full battle report together, analyzing every detail of the engagement to extract lessons for future encounters. The tactical data showed clear patterns in how the Zoreth fleet had adapted their strategies mid-battle, information that would prove invaluable in preparing for whatever came next. "Their command structure appears heavily centralized," Elena observed, studying the moment when the fleet's coordination collapsed, following the destruction of Threxel's flagship. "Once we removed their commanding vessel, the remaining ships lost cohesion almost immediately." "That's a significant vulnerability," Marcus agreed. "If we can identify and target their command vessels early in future engagements, we might be able to disrupt their coordination before they can bring their full strength to bear against us. Assuming they use the same command structure next time," Elena cautioned. "They adapted quickly during this battle. We should expect them to address this vulnerability in their future strategies as well." Marcus nodded grimly. "Which means we need to keep innovating just as quickly as they do. This war isn't going to be won by any single victory, no matter how significant. It's going to be won by whoever adapts faster, learns more efficiently, and refuses to stop improving." 3 days after the battle, a memorial service was held at Site Prometheus for the pilots and crew members who had lost their lives defending Earth. James Okoro, still recovering from his injuries, stood before the assembled crowd of mourners, delivering a speech that reflected the weight of command he now carried, more heavily than ever before. "Every person we lost in this battle, believed in something greater than themselves, James said, his voice carrying clearly across the somber gathering. They believed that Earth was worth protecting, that humanity deserved a chance to determine its own future, rather than surrender to a power that saw us as nothing more than another world to conquer. Their sacrifice bought us time to prepare, time to grow stronger, time to ensure that when the next battle comes, we will be ready for it. Elena Vasquez, standing among the crowd, thought back to her own experience on Hope Station, remembering the survivors she had comforted in that dark shelter, the promise she had made to protect them despite overwhelming odds. She understood, perhaps better than most, the true cost of the war that had now claimed so many more lives. After the memorial service concluded, Amara Osei approached James privately, finding him standing alone near the hangar, where the damaged Valkyrie-class ships continued undergoing repairs. "How are you holding up?" she asked gently. "Honestly, I don't know," James admitted. "We won. We actually beat them, drove back a fleet of 10 warships with barely more than 100 of our own. But every time I close my eyes, I see the ships we lost, the people who didn't make it home." "That weight never fully goes away," Amara said quietly. "But it also shouldn't stop you from doing what needs to be done next. The Xoreth will return, likely with an even larger force than before. Earth needs you, James. All of you. Now more than ever." James nodded slowly, understanding the truth in her words, even as the grief of recent losses still weighed heavily on his heart. "Then we keep preparing," he said firmly. "We keep building, keep training, keep learning from every battle, until we're ready for whatever they throw at us next." In the weeks following the battle, Earth's leaders convened to discuss the full implications of their victory and the challenges that still lay ahead. The United Earth Defense Council authorized an immediate expansion of ship production, incorporating lessons learned from the recent engagement into new designs that addressed weaknesses discovered during the fight. "We need contingency plans for a scenario where they don't rely on a single command vessel next time," Marcus Webb told the assembled council members. "If they distribute command authority across multiple ships, our previous tactic of targeting their flagship won't work the same way again." "Our research division is already working on solutions," Amara reported. "We're developing new sensor technology that can identify command and control signatures across multiple vessels simultaneously, allowing us to disrupt their coordination, even if they distribute their leadership structure." Elena Vasquez, now serving in an increasingly prominent advisory role, raised additional concerns during the meeting. "We also need to consider the political implications of this ongoing conflict," she said. "The public knows more now than ever before about the true scale of the threat we face. We need clear, honest communication about what happened, what we're doing to prepare, and what people can expect if this war continues to escalate." The council agreed, and within days, a carefully prepared announcement was made to the global public, revealing the true nature of the battle that had taken place near Jupiter's orbit. Rather than causing widespread panic, as some officials had feared, the announcement instead sparked an unprecedented wave of unity and support across the planet. Volunteers flocked to recruitment centers, wanting to contribute however they could to humanity's defense. Nations that had previously offered only limited cooperation now fully committed their resources to the shared cause of planetary survival. As Earth continued rebuilding and strengthening its defenses in the aftermath of this crucial victory, far across the galaxy, within the heart of the Xoreth Empire, a very different kind of reckoning was taking place. Threxil Vaughn, having survived the humiliating retreat with his heavily damaged flagship, now faced the judgment of the Grand Overseer himself, knowing that failure against a primitive world for a second time would carry consequences far beyond mere professional embarrassment. The stage was set for an even greater confrontation, one that would ultimately determine not just the fate of a single battle, but the future of humanity's place among the stars. Threxil Vaughn stood once more before the ruling council of the Xoreth Empire, his damaged flagship now under repair in a distant shipyard, while he faced judgment for the second failed attempt to conquer Earth. The council chamber felt colder this time, the assembled representatives from 100 conquered worlds watching him, with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed satisfaction at witnessing a Xoreth commander's humiliation. Grand Overseer Calvex Doru studied Threxil with cold, calculating eyes, his ancient face betraying no emotion as he considered the reports from the failed invasion. 10 ships, Calvex said slowly. 10 warships, against a fleet of primitive vessels barely 6 months developed, and you retreated in defeat. Grand Overseer, their technology has advanced far beyond what our records suggested possible, Threxel said, choosing his words carefully. They identified specific vulnerabilities in our shield and weapon systems that no other species has ever discovered. Their tactical adaptation during battle exceeded anything we have previously encountered. Excuses, Calvex said dismissively, though a flicker of genuine concern crossed his ancient features. This is the second failure against this single insignificant world. The Council grows restless. Threxel Von. Some among us begin to wonder if this species represents a threat far greater than a simple conquest target. A representative from one of the older conquered worlds, an alien named Vorash, who had served the Goreth Empire for over 2 centuries, spoke up cautiously. Grand Overseer, if I may offer a different perspective, perhaps this world should not be conquered through simple force alone. Perhaps a different approach is warranted. Calvex turned his attention to Vorash. Explain. This species has shown remarkable adaptability and determination, Vorash continued. Rather than risk further losses attempting outright conquest, perhaps the Empire should consider approaching them differently. A negotiated arrangement, perhaps, rather than continued costly warfare. Murmurs of disagreement spread through parts of the council chamber, though several representatives nodded thoughtfully at this suggestion. Calvex considered the proposal carefully, weighing the mounting costs of continued conflict against the Empire's long tradition of conquest through overwhelming force. The Empire does not negotiate with primitive species, Calvex finally said, though his tone carried less absolute certainty than it once had. However, I acknowledge that our previous approach has proven insufficient. We will commit our full main battle fleet to this conquest. 50 warships, led personally by myself. This world will learn, once and for all, the true price of resistance against the Xoreth Empire. Threxel's eyes widened slightly at this announcement. The Grand Overseer himself, leading the main battle fleet personally, represented an unprecedented commitment of Xoreth military might, one that had never before been necessary against any conquered world in the Empire's long history. Grand Overseer, such a commitment, Threxel began, but Calvex silenced him with a sharp gesture. You will accompany this fleet, Threxel Von, as a reminder of what failure costs, Calvex said coldly. Perhaps witnessing true, overwhelming force will teach you the lesson your previous attempts failed to demonstrate to our enemies. Back on Earth, 3 months after the battle near Jupiter's orbit, the United Earth Defense Council continued expanding humanity's defenses at an unprecedented pace. The Earth Defense Fleet now numbered over 300 Valkyrie-class ships, incorporating numerous improvements based on lessons learned from the previous engagement. New sensor technology could detect distributed command signatures across multiple vessels, addressing the vulnerability that had proven crucial in the last battle. Elena Vasquez had taken on an expanded role as the Council's chief strategic advisor, working closely with Marcus Webb to develop increasingly sophisticated contingency plans for future engagements. She stood before a large tactical display, reviewing updated intelligence gathered from Earth's expanding network of deep space sensors. We're detecting unusual energy signatures at the edge of the solar system, she reported during an emergency council meeting, far larger than anything we've previously encountered. Current estimates suggest a fleet of 50 or more vessels. The room fell into stunned silence at this news. 50 ships represented a force 5 times larger than the previous invasion attempt, a commitment of military resources that suggested the Xoreth Empire had decided to end their conflict with Earth decisively, one way or another. 50 ships, Marcus Webb repeated grimly. That's not just another attempt to punish us for our previous victories. That's a full invasion force. Amara Osei, participating remotely from Site Prometheus, spoke up over the video link. Our current fleet strength stands at 312 Valkyrie-class ships, with an additional 40 vessels completing final preparations. We also have the modified weapon technology from the previous battle, now installed across a much larger portion of our fleet than before. Will it be enough? Asked a representative from the European delegation, voicing the fear that everyone in the room silently shared. Elena studied the tactical projections carefully before answering. It will have to be, she said firmly. We've had 9 months to prepare since the first attack on Hope Station. Every lesson learned, every technological advancement, every ounce of unity, forged between nations that once considered each other rivals. All of it comes down to this moment. We cannot afford to fail. As preparations accelerated across Earth's defense network, James Okoro gathered his most experienced pilots for a final strategic briefing before what everyone understood would be the decisive battle for humanity's survival. Sophia Marchetti and David Osei stood beside him, both fully recovered from their injuries sustained in the previous engagement, ready once again to lead the fight against an overwhelming enemy force. 50 ships, James said, addressing the assembled squadron leaders in the main briefing hall. This isn't a probing attack or a punitive strike. This is their main fleet, likely commanded by their highest-ranking leadership. They intend to end this war, permanently, one way or another. "What's our plan?" asked a squadron leader from the Australian contingent, her expression tense but determined. "We use everything we've learned," James said. "Every tactic, every piece of intelligence, every technological advantage we've developed over the past 9 months. We fight smarter, not just harder. And we do not give up, no matter how overwhelming their numbers might seem." Sophia stepped forward, outlining the specific tactical approach they had developed for this crucial engagement. "Our new sensor technology will allow us to identify their distributed command structure in real time, letting us target multiple leadership vessels simultaneously, rather than relying on a single decisive strike like before. We'll divide our fleet into 6 major task forces, each capable of operating independently, while maintaining coordinated overall strategy." David added additional details about the improved fracture cannon technology now deployed across a significant portion of the fleet. "We've also developed a new tactic based on what worked against Threxel's flagship previously. Rather than relying on just 3 modified ships, we now have 30 vessels equipped with the concentrated discharge weapon, giving us far greater flexibility in delivering decisive strikes against multiple targets." As final preparations continued across Earth's massive defense network, the approaching Zorith fleet grew steadily closer, its 50 warships moving in a formation designed specifically to counter the tactics that had proven successful against Threxel's smaller force during the previous engagement. Aboard the lead vessel, a massive flagship, even larger than Threxel's previous command, Grand Overseer Calvex Doru personally oversaw final preparations for what he intended to be the definitive conquest of Earth. "This world's resistance ends today," Calvex declared to his assembled fleet commanders. "We commit everything necessary to ensure victory. No more underestimating their capabilities, no more tactical hesitation. Overwhelming force, applied without mercy, until this primitive species finally understands the true meaning of Zorith supremacy." Threxel Von, standing among the assembled commanders aboard Calvex's flagship, felt a complicated mixture of determination and lingering doubt. He had underestimated humanity twice already, and though he desperately wanted to redeem his previous failures, a small part of him wondered if this small, stubborn planet might prove more dangerous than even the Grand Overseer's overwhelming force could overcome. When the Zorith fleet finally arrived at the edge of the solar system, Earth's defense network detected their approach immediately, triggering the largest mobilization in human history. Every available Valkyrie-class ship launched from bases across the planet, forming into the 6 coordinated task forces that James and his fellow commanders had carefully planned during months of preparation. "This is it," James announced to the assembled fleet as they moved to intercept the approaching enemy near the orbit of Mars, closer to Earth than either previous engagement, reflecting the desperate need to protect the homeworld from a force this size. "Everything we've built, everything we've learned, comes down to the next few hours. Fight for Hope Station. Fight for Earth. Fight for every person counting on us to protect their future." As the 2 massive fleets closed the final distance, preparing for what would become the largest and most decisive battle in human history, Elena Vasquez watched from the command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, her heart heavy with the knowledge that countless lives hung in the balance of the coming conflict. "All fleets engage," Marcus Webb ordered finally, his voice carrying the weight of 9 months of preparation and the desperate hope that humanity's efforts would prove sufficient against overwhelming odds. The battle began, with an intensity that dwarfed both previous engagements combined. 50 Zorith warships unleashed devastating firepower against Earth's defense fleet, while 350 human vessels responded with coordinated precision, exploiting every tactical advantage developed over months of careful preparation. Explosions lit up the darkness of space, as ships on both sides suffered heavy damage, the battle unfolding across a vast expanse of space near Mars's orbit. James led his task force against one section of the Zoreth formation, using the new sensor technology to identify command vessels among the enemy fleet. "I'm reading multiple command signatures," he reported to his squadron. "They've learned from last time, distributing leadership across at least 6 vessels." "Copy that," Sophia responded from her own task force, engaging a different section of the enemy fleet. "Targeting secondary command vessel now." David, leading the squadron equipped with the improved concentrated discharge weapons, coordinated a devastating strike against one of the identified command vessels, his ship and 5 others converging their fire in a synchronized blast that overwhelmed the target's shields entirely, crippling it in a single decisive strike. "Command Vessel 3 eliminated," David reported, watching as the damaged Zoreth ship drifted powerless amid the chaos of battle. Aboard his flagship, Calvex Doru watched with growing fury as his carefully planned formation began suffering unexpected losses. "They've identified our distributed command structure," he realized, his ancient composure finally cracking under the strain of unexpected resistance. "Concentrate defensive fire around remaining command vessels immediately." The battle raged on for hours, both sides suffering heavy losses, as the largest conflict in human history unfolded across the vastness of space. Slowly, methodically, Earth's forces began gaining a crucial advantage, their superior tactical coordination and technological improvements gradually overwhelming the Zoreth fleet's numerical superiority. Threxil Vaughn, commanding a portion of the fleet himself, found his section increasingly isolated as human forces systematically dismantled the Zoreth's coordinated defense. He watched with growing despair as ship after ship fell to Earth's improved weapons and tactics, understanding with grim certainty that this battle, humanity's largest and most desperate stand, was slowly turning in their favor. "Grand Overseer, we are losing this engagement," Scree reported from Threxil's side, having transferred to serve under his command once again for this crucial battle. 17 ships destroyed, 23 others severely damaged. Our remaining forces struggle to maintain coordinated resistance. Calvex Doru, watching his once overwhelming fleet crumble under humanity's determined resistance, finally understood the terrible truth that Threxil had tried to warn him about following their first encounter. This was not a primitive species to be easily conquered through simple overwhelming force. This was a species capable of adapting, learning, and fighting back with a determination that matched, and perhaps exceeded, anything the Zoreth Empire had encountered in 100 previous conquests. "Order a general retreat," Calvex finally commanded, his ancient voice heavy with the bitter taste of unprecedented defeat. "We cannot sustain further losses against this level of resistance." As the remaining Exoreth ships began their desperate retreat, human forces pressed their advantage, destroying several more vessels as they attempted to flee the battle. James Okoro watched the enemy fleet's retreat with exhausted disbelief, unable to fully comprehend that humanity had actually defeated the Zoreth Empire's main battle fleet. "Command, this is Okoro," he reported, his voice carrying the weight of 9 months of preparation and hours of desperate combat. "The enemy fleet is retreating. We have won this engagement." In the command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, cheers erupted as the final tactical reports confirmed Earth's unprecedented victory. 31 Zoreth warships destroyed, 19 others severely damaged during their retreat, against Earth's own losses of 87 ships destroyed, and countless others damaged. Elena Vasquez felt tears of relief and exhaustion streaming down her face as she watched the retreating Zoreth fleet finally disappear, beyond the edge of Earth's sensor range, their emergency jump drives carrying them away, from a world that had proven far more dangerous than their ancient empire had ever anticipated. 3 weeks after the battle, Earth's leaders gathered for a historic ceremony, honoring the sacrifice of everyone who had given their lives, defending humanity's future. James Okoro, Sophia Marchetti, and David Osei stood together among the assembled crowd, having survived 3 major battles against overwhelming odds, their names now permanently woven into the history of humanity's fight for survival. Elena Vasquez delivered a speech before the assembled crowd, her words carrying the weight of everything she had experienced since that terrible day when Hope Station had first come under attack. "We did not choose this war," she said, her voice steady, despite the emotion evident beneath her words. But when it came to our doorstep, humanity chose not to surrender. We chose to fight, to adapt, to grow stronger, with every challenge we faced. We honor today the sacrifice of everyone who gave their lives to make this victory possible, and we commit ourselves to building a future worthy of that sacrifice. Far across the galaxy, within the Zoreth Empire's ruling council, Grand Overseer Calvex Doru faced the difficult reality of humanity's unprecedented resistance. The council chamber, once confident in the Empire's unstoppable might, now grappled with a fundamental question that had never before required serious consideration. What happens when a conquered world refuses to remain conquered? When a primitive species proves capable of standing against the full might of an ancient galactic empire? This world cannot be easily conquered, Calvex admitted to the assembled council, his ancient voice carrying newfound humility that surprised many of the gathered representatives. Perhaps Vorash's earlier suggestion deserves serious reconsideration. Perhaps this species should be approached not as a conquest, but as something else entirely. On Earth, as humanity began the long process of rebuilding after 3 devastating but ultimately victorious battles, a new understanding slowly took hold across the planet. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and the universe itself was far more dangerous than anyone had previously imagined. But humanity had also proven something remarkable about itself in the process, that when faced with overwhelming odds, when pushed to the very edge of extinction, the human spirit refused to simply accept defeat. Hope Station itself was eventually rebuilt, larger and stronger than before, standing as a permanent monument to both the tragedy that had started this war and the resilience that had ultimately allowed humanity to survive it. Elena Vasquez returned to the moon one final time for the base's reopening ceremony, standing once again in the same corridors where she had once comforted frightened survivors in the darkness of an uncertain future. The war with the Zoreth Empire was far from truly over, and humanity understood that future challenges would inevitably arise as they took their first tentative steps into a wider, more dangerous universe. But for the first time since that terrible attack on Hope Station, humanity faced this uncertain future not with fear, but with hard-won confidence, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead among the stars, humanity would face them together, unified, and unwilling to ever simply surrender to overwhelming odds. Earth had unleashed hell upon those who dared attack it, and in doing so, had earned its place among the stars, not as a conquered world, but as a force to be respected, and perhaps, eventually, as an equal among whatever other civilizations existed across the vast darkness of space. In the months following the great battle near Mars, the full scale of what humanity had accomplished slowly became clear to people around the world. News broadcasts finally showed unedited footage of the conflict, revealing to the public just how close Earth had come to total defeat, and just how much courage and sacrifice had been required to secure victory. Memorials were built in cities across every continent, listing the names of pilots and crew members who had given their lives across 3 major engagements with the Zoreth fleet. James Okoro found himself reluctantly thrust into the role of a public figure, asked to speak at ceremonies and give interviews about his experiences leading the fleet through its darkest hours. He accepted these responsibilities with the same quiet determination he had shown in battle, always careful to redirect praise toward the many pilots and crew members who had not survived to see the victory they had helped secure. "People keep calling me a hero," he told Sophia Marchetti one evening as they sat together at Site Prometheus, watching new recruits training in the flight simulators that had once prepared them for their own desperate battles. "But the real heroes are the ones who didn't come home. I just did my job and got lucky enough to survive it." Sophia nodded, understanding the complicated feelings that came with surviving when so many others had not. "Maybe," she said, "or maybe doing your job well, under those circumstances, is exactly what makes someone a hero. Either way, the people out there need someone to look up to right now, someone who can show them that humanity actually can face impossible odds and win." David Osei, meanwhile, had returned to research work alongside his aunt, applying lessons learned from the battle to further improve Earth's defensive capabilities. Their research into Zoreth technology had provided the Empire's own scientists with unexpected insight, captured technology and data from destroyed enemy vessels, revealed new possibilities for both offense and defense that would take years to fully understand and implement. We captured enough wreckage from the battle to potentially reverse engineer their jump drive technology, Amara told David during one of their research sessions. If we can understand how they travel between star systems so quickly, it could change everything about how humanity approaches space exploration in the future. Assuming we ever get the chance to explore peacefully, David said, a note of caution in his voice. The Zoreth might return again, and next time, they might bring something we haven't prepared for at all. Amara nodded, acknowledging this sobering possibility, which is exactly why our work isn't finished. Regardless of how significant this victory was, we continue improving, continue researching, continue preparing for whatever the future might bring. Elena Vasquez, in the months following the battle, took on a new role helping to establish what would eventually become known as the United Earth Space Command, a permanent institution designed to oversee humanity's ongoing defense and exploration efforts beyond the planet's atmosphere. She worked closely with representatives from every major nation, helping design a governing structure that would ensure the unprecedented cooperation forged during the crisis would continue long after the immediate threat had passed. We cannot allow the unity we've built to fade away once the danger feels less immediate, she argued during one particularly difficult council session, where old political rivalries had begun resurfacing now that the direct threat to Earth had been pushed back. The Xoreth Empire is still out there. Other threats may exist that we haven't even discovered yet. Humanity's survival depends on maintaining this cooperation, not returning to old patterns of division and competition. Her arguments, backed by the undeniable evidence of what unified human effort had accomplished against overwhelming odds, eventually won over even the most skeptical delegates. The United Earth Space Command was formally established, incorporating the Earth Defense Fleet, Site Prometheus's research divisions, and diplomatic efforts aimed at preparing humanity for whatever future encounters with alien civilizations might bring. Far across the galaxy, within the Zoreth Empire, Grand Overseer Calvex Doru's unprecedented defeat sparked significant debate among the ruling council regarding the Empire's future approach toward Earth. Vorash, whose earlier suggestion of diplomatic engagement had been previously dismissed, found his voice carrying considerably more weight in the aftermath of such a costly and humiliating defeat. Continued military engagement with this species will only result in further losses, Vorash argued during a subsequent council session. Their technology, tactics, and determination have proven far beyond what our initial assessments suggested. Perhaps it is time the Empire considered a different relationship with this world entirely, not as a conquest, but as a potential trading partner, or even an ally against threats that may exist beyond our current knowledge. Calvex, still processing the weight of his historic defeat, found himself increasingly receptive to arguments he would have dismissed outright before the battle near Mars. The Empire has never before considered equal relations with a conquered world, he said slowly. But perhaps this situation calls for reconsidering traditions that no longer serve our interests. Send envoys to this world, not warships. See if genuine communication is possible before we consider our next steps. Back on Earth, several months after the Great Battle, an unusual signal reached the United Earth Space Command's deep space monitoring stations. Not a weapon, not an attacking fleet, but a formal communication request from the Zoreth Empire, requesting a meeting to discuss the future relationship between our respective civilizations. Elena Vasquez, now serving as a senior diplomatic advisor alongside her military responsibilities, found herself at the center of preparations for what would become humanity's first genuine diplomatic contact with an alien civilization. This could be a trick, she cautioned during the emergency council session, called to discuss the unexpected message. Or it could be a genuine opportunity to end this conflict permanently, on terms far better than continued warfare would provide. We prepare for both possibilities, Marcus Webb said firmly. Full military readiness maintained at all times, but we also send a delegation prepared to negotiate seriously if the offer proves genuine. The subsequent negotiations, held cautiously at a neutral point in space, between Earth and the retreating Zoreth fleet, proved to be the beginning of a long and complicated relationship between humanity and the ancient Galactic Empire that had once sought to conquer their world. Threxel Vaughn, still bearing the weight of his repeated failures, served as one of the primary Zoreth negotiators, finding an unexpected mutual respect developing between himself and the human representatives he had once tried to conquer. "You fought with more determination than any species we have previously encountered," Threxel admitted to Elena during one of their early negotiation sessions. His cold Zorith demeanor softened somewhat by months of reflection following his repeated defeats. "The Empire has never before considered equal terms with a world it failed to conquer. Your people have earned something unprecedented in our long history." Elena studied the alien commander carefully, remembering the terror of that first attack on Hope Station, the friends and colleagues who had died in the subsequent battles, the sacrifice required to reach this unlikely moment of diplomatic possibility. "We didn't ask for this war," she said honestly, "but we won't apologize for defending our home either. If genuine peace is possible between our civilizations, built on mutual respect rather than conquest, then we're willing to explore that possibility. But Earth will never again be caught unprepared for whatever threats the universe might bring." The negotiations continued for months, slowly building toward a formal treaty that would establish trade relations, technological exchange, and mutual defense agreements between Earth and the Zorith Empire. It was not the peace anyone had originally imagined possible, forged as it was from the ashes of 3 devastating battles and the deaths of thousands on both sides. But it represented something humanity had proven capable of achieving, even against overwhelming odds. Not just survival, but eventual respect from a civilization that had conquered 100 worlds before finally meeting a species willing to fight for its right to remain free. Years later, Hope Station stood rebuilt and thriving on the lunar surface, larger and more advanced than its original design, serving as a permanent symbol of humanity's resilience in the face of existential threat. Elena Vasquez, now an elder statesperson within the United Earth Space Command, often visited the memorial gardens built where the original school dome had once stood, remembering the children she had comforted during those desperate hours, many of whom had grown up to become leaders and scientists themselves within humanity's expanding presence among the stars. James Okoro, Sophia Marchetti, and David Osei each continued serving humanity in various capacities, their names forever linked to the pivotal battles that had secured Earth's survival and eventual standing among galactic civilizations. Their story, and the story of everyone who had fought and sacrificed during those critical months, became a permanent part of humanity's history, a reminder that even when faced with seemingly impossible odds, the human spirit, when truly united, could accomplish extraordinary things. Earth had faced destruction at the hands of an ancient alien empire, and rather than accepting defeat, humanity had risen to meet that challenge with courage, ingenuity, and unbreakable determination. In doing so, they had not only secured their own survival, but had earned something even more valuable, a place of genuine respect among the stars, built not through conquest, but through the simple, powerful truth that some worlds, no matter how young or seemingly primitive, simply refuse to kneel before overwhelming force. The war that had begun with the destruction of a small moon base had ultimately transformed humanity forever, pushing them to unite as never before, to innovate beyond what anyone had thought possible, and to prove, once and for all, that Earth was a world worth respecting, worth negotiating with, and worth remembering, as the day the universe first learned exactly what it meant to truly unleash hell against an enemy foolish enough to threaten humanity's home.